Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot Interview Series. We're joined today by Arn Anderson in his home in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a pleasure to be here. You've been all over the world. You've wrestled in NWA, WCW, of course, right now, the World Wrestling Federation, Georgia Championship Wrestling, New Japan. You've done it all, and I definitely want to ask you, I guess our first question would be asking you how you got started in the wrestling business.
Well, first of all, Rob, welcome to my home.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. It's always a pleasure to give fans a little knowledge of the person behind Arn Anderson, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
So back to the question.
You got hooked up with Junkyard Dog, I believe, sort of to get into the business, or something? Was...
There's a story that goes there. We should probably back up a little bit from there. I actually started going to Atlanta television, which was then called the NWA, Georgia Championship Wrestling. I went down, I wrestled some TV matches, and I happened to wrestle Bob Armstrong and Brad in a TV match, and obviously pretty much got pounded.
Right.
But Bob saw something in me and maybe potential or diamond in the rough or whatever, and following that match, Bob went back to Pensacola, where he became part of the booking committee and booking office down there, talent relations. Called me and asked me if I'd like to come down and for a few weeks work. So I went down and worked about 3 weeks for Southeastern Championship Wrestling. When that little stint was over, he said, "Listen, Bill Watts is over in Louisiana. I think he would like a guy like you. What do you think?" I said, "Bob, this is what I want to do, you know. Please, anything you can do." He sent me over to do a couple of TVs. Went over. Bill asked me to come back and put me to work. 5.5 months, I worked for him, strictly first match, all the way, just learning. Didn't know anything.
Right. Were you a wrestling fan growing up?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The biggest. God, I was the kid at 8, 9 years old would put on a ski mask, put a shoelace down in my underwear, call one of my buddies down, he'd come in the front door, I'd jump off the couch and strangle him to death. The worst. I was the worst. It's all I ever wanted to do from day one. Consequently, being such a huge fan, for Bob Armstrong, who was one of my heroes, to take an interest in me was flabbergasting. Anyway, where the Junkyard Dog story comes in is, at the end of that 5.5 months, it was time, because guys in those days went from territory to territory, and the length of stay in an underleaf slot was probably 6 months tops. Matt Bourne, who was with Ted DiBiase on top, as part of the Rat Pack with himself, Doug, and DiBiase, Matt Bourne was heading to Atlanta, and he needed a partner. We were at TV one day, and they were kicking it around. I just happened to be sitting there, and he said, "I need a partner for Bourne, you know. Dog, what do you think?" He said, "Bill." And that voice of his, "Bill, kid looks just like Ole Anderson. That's an Anderson. Send him with him, make him an Anderson." Bill looked at me and said, "I'll get on the phone." It was Junkyard Dog's idea, and I owe him. God bless him. Rest in peace. He was a good man.
Right.
That was my first break. He got a hold of Ole. Ole said, "Let me have a look at the kid." That's where he brought me in with Bourne and renamed me from Marty Lundy, as to who I am, to Arn Anderson. Ole gave me the name.
What was Ole like as a booker in Georgia?
Tyrant, loud, intimidating, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly fair. Had tunnel vision, and probably was the one guy that I was the most afraid of in the wrestling business. Intimidated me to no end.
What about Bill Watts? Because it sounds like you're talking about Bill Watts, but you're actually talking about Ole.
Same thing.
Right.
Again, I knew Bill Watts strictly as a fan up until that point. Then I knew him as the boss. Bill had I guess Bill was a man's man and always had been, plus the fact that Bill was always the boss.
Right.
So he held your future in his hands. And a lot of guys would not rock the boat. In those days, you didn't cross the boss, period. Number one, God knows what it would have cost you physically, financially, and if they blackballed you in those days, if you were a troublemaker, I mean, what are you going to do, whack the boss?
Right.
What's the next guy going to do, the next promoter? Bring you in knowing that you whacked the last guy? Bill was pretty intimidating too, equally as much as Ole, I would say.
Right, right. Now in Georgia, you teamed up with Ole and Tommy Rich. I think you worked some matches with the Road Warriors, right?
Yep.
What were they like?
Actually, the first, after Bourne and I split up, he pretty much went his way, I went my way. Ole really couldn't figure out, that's where the tunnel vision comes in. We were brought in to be in the tag slot. We were going to go for the national tag titles, which were the big belts and the territory, Ole's territory at that time. About a week or two before that, some things happened. Bourne was let go. Ole couldn't see me in any other light. So he went up and he found the Road Warriors in the gym in Minneapolis, which was the break of a lifetime for those guys. He brought them down. They were big, incredibly strong, incredibly green, incredibly dangerous. And the first matches were, we had a 10-day tour. It was Barry Darsow, who was Man Mountain Darsow at that point, myself, and Joe Lightfoot, Indian, about this tall, great guy and tremendous wrestler. We wrestled the Road Warriors, and let me see who the partner was. I want to say Rick Rude. That's possible. We went around for 10 days, and they almost killed us. I mean, they were animals.
Right.
What can I say? Joe was a 600 bencher. I'm sure Hawk was right around 5. Intense as anybody I've ever seen. It was a tremendous learning experience because from that point on, no matter how bad it got in the ring, the rest of my career wasn't as bad as it was those 10 days.
So you saw the money potential in the Road Warriors back when they first stepped into the business.
Oh, they were incredible. People instantly were in awe of them. They were kind of the first team of that magnitude and that size. I mean, there were some big teams, but never physique-wise, to my memory as a fan. I never saw a distinct team that stayed together. I mean, there were individuals that came along before them, obviously, the Putskys, the Tony Atlases and those guys, but singles, but to have two.
Right.
Oh, and you put Ellering with those guys, they were meant to be a cash cow.
Right.
And obviously they were.
Who are some other guys that you worked with in Georgia that stand out in your mind?
Several learning processes. Rich, of course, was the greatest babyface, I think, of his time. Incredible wrestler. Tommy could drink all night, wrestle all night, stay up all night, never go to the gym, ever, and he was always just right there, boom, boom, boom. Larry Zbyszko at that time, I learned a tremendous amount from him. Sitting talking to him, knowledge. He was real and is real savvy as far as the business goes. Paul Orndorff gave me a quote in the gym that I lived by my entire career. I was in there working out, and he had watched a few matches with Bourne and I as partners. And he came up to me and said one day, he said, "Been watching you." He said, "You got potential." He said, "You stay in the gym, keep your body right, you learn how to talk, you learn how to wrestle, and they can't deny you. Carry that with you." Greatest bit of advice I ever had. And Paul was on his way out, heading to the WWF, and we know that story.
Right, right. Now, were you ever discouraged because you never had the bodybuilder's type of body? You were like, you weren't a big muscle guy of your size?
Discouraged? No. I felt like, when I came in the business, I was about 6'1", about 255, and I'd done some powerlifting and was stronger than the average bear walking around on the streets. But you walk in this business, a guy that size is right in the middle of the road. Not a small guy, not one of the bigger guys. I felt I was big enough to hold my own, with most guys, I was more concerned with learning the wrestling end of it because I saw the success that a lot of guys had. And I figured if I could master that part of it, I was strong enough, not quick enough, but quick enough
Right.
to overcome any shortcomings I might have. And the one thing that I knew I was a student of the business. I would, do everything I had to, watch every match I had to, and to improve. And I figured I could overcome anything.
Who would you consider some of your mentors back then? Would it be Ole or?
Oh, absolutely. Bourne taught me a lot in the short time. I should probably back up. The first teacher I actually had, I wrestled Tim Horner every night. And Tim had been in the business at that point probably 3-4 years. Maybe not that long, a couple years anyway. But he was already very good.
Right.
And he gave me a wrestling lesson every single night, 20 minutes every single night for 5 months. Because we basically wrestled each other 3/4 of that 5.5 months that I was there. That was probably the first mentor I had. Ted DiBiase, which was the most probably credible compliment that I could have, would come out and watch my matches. Main eventers in those days weren't seen before their match. Teddy would come to the curtain, watch my matches. Again, he took an interest in me, and there's a story that goes with that too on my way out. But I would say of that first 5.5 months, Ted DiBiase was the guy that was my mentor, and he gave me a piece of advice too on my way out. I said, Teddy, I can't thank you for helping me, every night. I don't know what to do to repay you. He let me travel with him. Just talking to him every night was such a learning experience. He said, here's what I want you to do. He said, if you ever get in a position, and you will, to learn this business like I think you will, you see a kid out there that you think deserves your help, you help him. It's all the repayment I need.
Right.
And I took that with me, and I've passed that on also.
We'll talk about, you've helped Bill Goldberg, from what I understand, come a long way, so we'll talk about that later on. How did your move from Georgia to Jim Crockett Promotions come about?
Okay, after we wrestled the Road Warriors, and I kind of hung around Georgia for a while, but Ole, he only saw me in that one light. He never saw me in any other light. I don't know if that's good or bad, because if I'd have hung around there, who knows what the end result would have been. I went back. I went back to Pensacola.
Right.
For 1.5 years. And that was my proving ground where I got experience in front of the cameras. Again, I got to work with Bob Armstrong, Brad Armstrong, Jimmy Golden, Ron Fuller, Robert Fuller, all the Armstrong boys, the Tonga Kid, who was first starting at that particular time. There was just some great talent, and I got to do interviews every week. Jerry Stubbs and I were partners.
Right.
Jerry taught me a lot. He was a tremendous wrestler, unlimited potential, had some health problems, probably cost him a multi-million-dollar career. That's where Rick came down, and I actually met Rick in Georgia a couple times before going to Pensacola. He would come in as a champion, and I just talked to him a couple times, but we started to become friends because I would drive him around the territory. In those days, to go pick up the champion in the airport, drive him around was an honor, obviously. So obviously I volunteered to do that. Being a single guy down there, I didn't have family responsibilities, and I went and picked him up and took him to the towns. We became friends. He kept saying, listen, Charlotte is in a rebuilding process. I know that we'd love to have you. I want you. I can make it happen. And I put him off, and I put him off. Then I met my current wife, who's from Pensacola, and I really didn't want to leave. But the money offer that he was talking, and it was just a handshake verbal agreement, was just too good to pass up.
Right.
So he got me booked, and Dusty Rhodes was booking at that time, and away I went.
Now, what are your initial impressions of Dusty Rhodes when you first met him?
Again, Marty Lundy, the wrestling fan, walked in the door and my chin hit the floor. I was meeting Dusty Rhodes. And I'd been wrestling at that point for 2.5 years. I was still awestruck, starstruck. he was, God, he was charismatic. You know, he was Dusty Rhodes when I walked in the door. He wasn't Virgil Runnels. He was Dusty Rhodes right out of the chute. And that impressed me so much. And he said, "Kid, I'll give you the ball, run with it. If you get some yardage, then I'll make sure that your position goes up." And it did.
Now, your first series, was it with Manny Fernandez when you first came in?
First television.
What are your memories of that?
Great. I had never met Manny. He came across, and just talking with him is a little distant because he didn't know me either, and the situation we were going to be in, you know, he was pretty intense, and I found out that's just the way Manny is. Manny is very intense. We had some pretty good fights, and I've been in bar fights that weren't that bad.
Right.
So it was good for me. It was good for him. It was a good first impression of me. I think the fans saw, you know, I get my ass handed to me and get up from it. That helps. That first impression is so crucial when you come into a new area and a new television. It helped me.
Now, what are your memories of winning the TV title for the first time when you beat Wahoo in the tournament?
Well, that was my first major
Right.
title. I had held the tag belts a couple times in Southeastern, but this was the big time. And I don't really know if it was wrestling Wahoo or winning the belt, which one rose above the other. Just the ability to be in the ring with a man like Wahoo McDaniel was such an honor, and to take the beating that he gave me made it all worthwhile. And to actually come out on top of a guy like that is, even though Wahoo was getting close to the end of his career, still he was more man than most guys in the locker room. And to me, it was a tremendous honor, and I was proud. Can I say I was very proud?
What about your memories of matches with Magnum TA?
Probably one of the most intense, stiffest guys I've ever been in the ring with. And stiff means, buddy, he would knock your head off. And no other way to put it. Those days, Magnum was about 255, and in that weight room constantly, and intense as anybody ever. He was hungry. He was starving. He wanted to be the best wrestler in the world, and buddy, he let you know it every time out there. But it was always a money match when you were in it. No problem with fan involvement. They were into it. They loved him, and he would have been one of the greatest of all time if it hadn't been for the tragedy.
When that happened, the car accident, I mean, how was the locker room affected? Pretty devastating.
Killed us. Killed us all. It was the first situation I'd been in the business where you had a tragedy of that magnitude. I'd seen every injury you could see. There weren't a lot of paralyzed situations in those days because the style of wrestling was a lot more. There wasn't a lot of stuff going on off the top rope, which has caused a lot more injuries. I mean, I saw the knees being blown out, the broken ankles, you know, the cracked ribs. I saw the standard injuries, but car wreck, and they said, you know, we went up there first thing the next morning, and first thing they told us is, you know, he may not make it through the night tonight. He probably won't. That just takes your breath. You know, here's one of the guys laying there, one of your friends, and we were so close. Jim Crockett Promotions in those days, the guys were so close, you have no idea. The rivalry was always there, the competitiveness, but we were like a traveling band of gypsies because there wasn't a lot of flying going on at first. It was get in your car and go, sometimes 600 miles, you know, round trip, and a lot of times, you know, 800 miles round trip. And when you're in a car 4 deep for 600-700 miles every day of the week, there's a lot of camaraderie, and you're with those same guys. No such thing as a day off. In 85, 86, and 87, there was no such thing as a day off. 7 days a week, boom. Jim Crockett, we never took a day down except for Christmas. So, you know, it hurt us. He was like your brother, being paralyzed.
How did the idea of the Horsemen come about?
The way the situation was set up for interviews with Jim Crockett, there were, I think, 228 interviews, and you would sometimes have more than one guy in a given interview segment, talking about his match? Well, obviously, Tully and Rick had been partners. Ole and I had been partners. Rick and Ole had been partners, so we were set up to have, I think, Tully must have been wrestling Dusty, Rick was wrestling somebody for the world title, maybe Magnum. Ole and I think, were wrestling the Road Warriors. So they used us all on this one interview. And it just came to mind, the old Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, scenario, the pestilence and all this. I used that kind of in that interview. Okay, when we come to X town, when it's over, this is what will be left when the Four Horsemen ride into town. And it just popped in my head. It was just an excerpt. When the interview was over, Tony Schiavone came around the camera and he said, you've just stumbled onto something here. You've named this group.
Right.
And we went with it.
It took off.
He pointed it out. We used it from that day, and it was a fluke.
Was there ever any problems with egos in the Horsemen at all? Or?
There was always ego problems as far as personal.
Right.
Things outside the business, bell to bell. The thing that made the Horsemen, I think, so great was the unselfishness. The fact that nobody tried to rise above anyone else. Everybody did their part. Everybody pulled their load. And what we tried to do is basically outdo each other. If Tully and I were on, hypothetically, right before Rick, or if it was Ole and I that were on right before Tully and Tully was right before Rick, we tried to outdo Tully. Tully tried to outdo Rick.
Right,
and it was that competitive. Still the show. That was the only, if you can call, tension between the Horsemen. It was all positive. But, when we were in those 8-mans and war games and everything, strictly business.
What was Ole like as a partner?
The greatest single learning experience I've ever had. He taught me more about tag wrestling in that short time than anyone has since. And it's knowledge I've been able to pass on because it's timeless. He and Gene put together some simple formulas that worked, and they still work today. The problem is you don't have anyone with the knowledge out there or the willingness to put them into place.
Right.
If a team came along that was coached properly, and at some point I'd love to have that opportunity to put some of those principles back into play. They were the best. They are the best. When the time capsule's cracked open, they'll still be the best.
Now, was it hard being heels since you guys were so over with the male audience?
It was easy bell to bell. It was hard trying to check into your hotel and walk the airports.
Right.
And sit down and have a meal because the people loved us. It was just that bad boy. It was the beginning of that bad boy era where they still loved the good guys, but it was starting to become that generation, late 80s, where everybody kind of liked a bit of a renegade.
Right.
And we were kind of the first group of guys that were that way, but it wasn't a low-class, redneck type of deal. We tried to carry ourselves with class, and I think that was the appeal.
What are your memories of your matches with Ron Garvin?
I wished many times I'd have just found a building to jump off of. He liked to kill me. It was, I don't know what to say. It stands out. I mean, there's a few guys that stand out. I mean, there's Buzz Sawyer. I've been in fights with him that were just brutal. Ronnie Garvin is another one. Besides being just a great wrestler, Ronnie Garvin could stretch you with just his legs and just stand up over you, and he'd have you hooked with just his legs. His arms would be free. Slap you in the face, chop you till your chest bled, but he didn't mind standing there taking it either. So
right.
He's a guy I really respected and carried himself as a gentleman outside the ring.
How about Dusty Rhodes?
Again, most charismatic guy I ever been in the ring with. He could talk him into the arena, and when he got him there, Dusty could perform. And for a guy his size, to have that much charisma, you never, there was always, and I was never one of the guys because let's face it, like I said, I didn't have one of those great bodies either. There was always the downside of Dusty's body and the fact that he wasn't in shape. In the bell ring, you never saw Dusty Rhodes' body. You saw this charisma that loomed around him, and he hooked the crowd and he held them in, bell to bell.
Somebody was saying, I forgot who it was, that Dusty liked to book himself to Tully because Tully made him look so good. So,
That's absolutely right.
all right.
Yeah, yeah.
What about Nikita Koloff?
Again, Nikita and I butted heads a little bit at first. Nikita was smart. Let me just preface it by saying he was smart enough to know what he wanted from the business. He came in, he lived thrifty, he saved his money. He never missed towns. He worked hard, stayed in the gym. Guy had an incredible body. He had an incredible look. His intensity was up. And he got what he wanted out of the business, and he got out. And I respect that. He walked away instead of hobbling away, like a lot of us have. He and I butted heads on some occasions because he didn't treat some of the underneath guys properly, and I had a problem with that. I think he's had a change in heart lately, but in that particular time, there was a couple of verbal instances where he would come on the plane late, the private plane, and there'd be someone sitting there, and he'd order an underneath guy to their seat or something, and that didn't gel with me. So we had some problems along those lines.
Were you ever disappointed that you didn't get to work with Rick in that era?
No, because I was so tickled to death being his partner.
Right.
It opened so many doors for me, and I sat there and marveled up close, as a learning experience as his partner, and it was such a, well, let's just face it, it was a gift. It was, Rick was responsible for me being in the position I was. I think I kept myself there on my own attributes, but obviously.
Right. One of the cameras just went off. And about, what were we talking about just then?
Flair.
Oh, Flair. Okay.
Disappointed not wrestling Flair.
How about your series of matches with the Rock and Roll Express? You and Ollie had some great matches with
Most
them.
fun I've ever had. It's the most fun. Ricky Morton was the most over guy at that particular time with strictly the girls that I've ever seen. And Robert too, but mostly Ricky. And you could move a crowd's emotion. You started pounding on Ricky, you would literally have people coming over the rail to get you. And that made a great scenario for a match. And it was great for the people, the fans. He was tremendous. They were so talented, and the fact that Ricky Morton looked like he was 12 years old, and here's Ole Anderson, the heel of all time, pounding on Ricky. It was just match made in heaven, and we drew a lot of money with those guys.
Now, when the Road Warriors, you guys worked with them again in Jim Crockett Promotions. Did they change a lot since you first wrestled them in Georgia?
Oh, yeah. Much more polished, still big, strong, and they just, I think having Ellering to do some of their talking and guide them, kept them on an even keel, because he was really a shooting manager. He took care of their travel, took care of their cars, their scheduling, drove them. He did everything. If you're a guy in this business, that takes a hell of a load off of you. And Hawk was pretty volatile. I got to know Mike and got a heart of gold, a heart as big as this room. Joe, same thing. Mike had that one volatile edge, and you never knew. Mike liked to party a little bit. He'd stay up late. He'd stay up a couple days sometimes. And when he would walk in that building, you didn't know what temperament he was going to be in. That was a little scary, but as far as being polished, they polished their act up pretty good.
Did Vince ever contact you at the time? This is like 86, 87 era?
I was sent messages through wrestlers,
Right.
but
nothing official
never
yet.
anything official.
How about your series of first matches with Sting? I guess the first question to even go before that question, what was the vibe like when the UWF guys came over when Crockett bought Watts out?
I think that was such a huge misuse of resources.
Right.
We absorbed this company. We bought a territory that I don't know what we bought, because with the television, we could have just went in and ran the towns anyway. So
Right.
you bought a losing prospect, but a lot of great talent. And it cost Crockett a lot of money, and it was one of those things that helped, in the end was part of the demise.
Right.
That and hot shot and going out west and private planes and all that mess. But that's another story. But, I mean, there was some tremendous talent in UWF. And if we would have merged that talent with ours, we would have strengthened our company incredibly. But we went into this them versus us.
Right.
Jim Crockett being the boss, having the political pull. Obviously, our guys were favored. And it kind of squashed them as a promotion. And that was a mistake, and it was a huge mistake. So there was a lot of guys that would have been very beneficial at that time. We should have been smart enough to elevate them and us, combine the two.
Right. Seems like only a couple guys like Sting survived that whole deal.
Yeah, Big Bubba survived.
Right.
Some casualties were Terry Taylor,
Steve Williams.
Steve Williams. Was Gordy there then?
No, I think he
No.
went back to Japan.
No. Okay.
Yeah. Eddie Gilbert.
Yeah, Eddie Gilbert.
Yeah, Eddie Gilbert.
What was Jim Crockett like
I
as a
don't-
promoter?
I don't know. I never got to know him.
Wow.
Obviously, I worked for the guy for 3.5 years, and he made me a tremendous living. I got close to Jackie. I was pretty close to David. But Jimmy is one of those guys that would never let you in. Never got to know him.
Right, right. How different was kayfabe in the business at the time compared to now? Where, I mean, like 10 years ago, we would never have done this interview.
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
just scratch that.
Okay.
That's just one of those.
Okay.
Sorry.
Cool. What was the feeling among you guys when Ole left the Horsemen?
It was one of those things that you knew it was a point in time when things were going to change for the worse,
Right.
and you just knew it. There's nothing you could do about it. The snowball had started rolling down the mountain. It was too far ahead to stop it because he wanted to go home. He had only came back for a short time in his mind. We didn't know that, and this Horseman thing was so hot. You knew if you took any original player out, it would never be as good. Putting Luger in was a great it was a great look for us, but Lex was big, green, and unknown. I mean, he had a fabulous look. Again, the girls loved it. It was
Right.
great for the girls, but to replace him at that time, Ole Anderson. It was a step down. Luger went on to prove himself, and he got over. But at that point in time, nothing is ever as good as the original. The first group of Horsemen will always be special. The first NWO will always be special. You know, there are just certain things that you can't rehash. The first Midnight Express, I think will always be special.
Right.
Lane and Eaton were nowhere as good as Condrey and Eaton. So I think it was a huge loss, and we all knew it. But okay, Sarah.
When Lex came in, what was his attitude like?
He had a great attitude. He wanted to learn. He was willing to listen. Lex is Lex. Lex is pretty sharp, as far as business dealings.
Right.
And he's probably the best self-promoter I've ever met. Lex looks like $1 million today. He looked like $1 million the first day he walked in the door, and he has parlayed that look into being a very wealthy man. He can convince you in 5 minutes. He could sell a nun a jockstrap and make her think she got a good deal.
Right.
And that's just the way Lex is. I mean, he's a great self-promoter. My hat's off to him. Got nothing negative to say about it. He's great.
Did any of the guys ever complain, I guess, about Dusty's booking at all? Like any of the guys in the locker room?
Oh, of course.
Right.
Here's the reality. If you're not wrestling the guy you want to wrestle, if you're not in the town, in those days sometimes we'd run 2 towns a night, if you're not in the town that you want to be, hypothetically, we lived here in Charlotte, they ran Albany, Georgia, they ran Charlotte, same night. If you're in Albany, Georgia, you were pissed. If you were in Charlotte, happy camper. it's a thankless, never-ending, pain-in-the-ass job being the booker. When things are great, you look like $1 million. When things are down, you're an idiot. So,
Right. What were the initial bunkhouse stampede matches like?
fun, but brutal. It's real easy when you got 20 or 25 guys in a ring. You're always going to have 7 or 8 not paying attention. A lot of broke ankles came out of that, some blown out knees, obviously a lot of stitches. But I think it was, exciting for the fans. I mean, 25 guys in there, come as you are, do what you want. I think it was the first kind of mass deal like that of its time.
Right. It was way before the Royal Rumble. So.
Oh, yeah.
What are your memories of your matches with Barry Windham?
Barry Windham struck me as probably, he's a phenomenon. Again, Barry would stay up all night. Barry would have a beautiful girl on his arm. He would stay up all night. He could go an hour, 90 minutes if he had to wrestling. Never went to the gym. And to be so big, he could do the strongman stuff, but he was as polished as Brad Armstrong. He was the all-around cowboy. And sweetheart of a guy. Barry here was Barry's deal. If Barry had $5,000 in his pocket and the keys to a Porsche sitting out back and a chick scheduled to meet him, he was set. That's as far as his ambition went.
Right.
Because Barry could have been the very best for as long as he wanted to be. He just, Barry would work a while, take some time off. Work a while, take some time off. This business, as you know, everything is momentum.
Right.
You're off TV for 6 months, you're out of mind. I don't care who you are.
Right.
And I think if he had one shortcoming, and I don't think it is, because as it turned out, Barry married a very wealthy girl, got a couple beautiful babies, beautiful girl, South Georgia. I think they own half of South Georgia, for God's sakes. It worked out for him. But wrestling, Barry was a dream.
Right. Now, did you prefer wrestling singles or tag teaming?
Tag.
Tag?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your memories of the first Crockett Cup?
I think that Tully and I didn't do very well. That was New Orleans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were we partners? I think Tully and I got put out by the Fantastics early.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. We didn't do very well at all. I thought it was a great concept, great promotion. Again, to go into a building that size, I thought was a mistake. We made a lot of hot shot mistakes in those days. I don't know what the rent on the Superdome was, but good Lord, it had to be huge.
Right.
If we did 20,000 people that night, it would have been much better to have went to the small building and filled it completely up, standing room only, maybe, other than have half the Superdome empty, and they had it halved off anyway. So that, you think about those things if you're a wrestler and you're in there and you look at the ambiance and you see all these empty seats. It adds to the atmosphere, and atmosphere is everything as a wrestler. If you've got 50 people sitting there not making a sound, those bumps hurt, and they hurt 10 times as bad. Take that same bump with 15,000 people screaming and that place rumbling, you don't feel a thing. So that's just kind of things you remember.
Right. Now, you worked the first War Games. You were the first guy in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was Florida, I believe. What was that like?
In the Omni.
Oh, yeah, the first one was there.
I think, again, that was the first War Games, and I think it was the best. I don't know why. I guess it was just, it stands out as being the first, and it was one of the most violent. Starting that thing, you were in there for about 33 to 35 minutes. And
right.
It was, there wasn't a wrestling hold for 35 minutes, and I wasn't a big cardio guy. I mean, Rick was pounding that Stairmaster. I didn't. I was in ring shape, thank God, but it was one of the most draining, because it was just getting banged and bumped around, and there was never a point that you could rest, and everybody was bleeding. I think it stands out as probably, in my mind, the best War Games. That one and the one we had in Jacksonville, which involved the Dangerous Alliance. I don't know if you saw that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Those two stand out. But the first one will always be special because, again, it was the concept.
Were there ever any plans, I guess, around this time to break up the Horsemen?
No,
No.
no.
Now, eventually, Lex turned in the Von Cal Stampede, I think, when he threw JJ over the top rope.
That was the first step of it. And then actually it was Windham
Right, Windham
that
took his
switched.
place.
Luger made a selfish deal. We had it designed to let JJ win. Luger was supposed to just jump over if he managed to be the last guy in.
Right.
We just said, eliminate yourself. Let's give this one to JJ. It was just a thank you for JJ being a hell of a manager and a hell of a guy. Luger double-crossed us, threw JJ out. We made a decision that day that, we're like a synchronized unit, all gears working in unison. One of them flies off on its own. We pull it.
Right.
We pulled it. We made the deal with Windham, and that was, from a purely wrestling standpoint, was a great move.
That was the best wrestling horse.
That was the best working wrestling tandem of all.
Definitely. Now, what are your memories of wrestling Luger nightly?
Big, strong, in shape. Still, at that point in time, his knowledge was not where it should have been, but he overcame it. Luger is one of those guys that's stronger than he looks, if you can believe it. If you've been in that gym with him, I mean, he's an animal in that gym, and he just overcame a lot of things with just sheer power. The one thing, and he kept himself in incredible cardio shape. You couldn't blow him up. You couldn't muscle him around. You could outmaneuver him for a while, but a guy that's that big and strong, and finally just wear you down.
How close were you guys all outside the ring? You, Tully, Flair, and Tight?
The interview went like this. We train together. We go to the gym together. We eat together. We party together. The only thing we don't do is share a room. That's the only time we're apart, and that's the absolute truth. Tully and Rick and I were as close as any three human beings could be. That 5, 6 hours or 7 hours at night that we're asleep is the only time we're apart. If we were out for 20 days, that's it. We were together around the clock.
Do you still keep contact with Tully at all? Or?
No, it's a funny thing. I saw him in Applebee's about a week ago. It was just a fluke thing. I had the family, and we were going to eat somewhere else, and there was a long wait. We went across the street and to Applebee's, which we never go. It was a fluke thing, and I went and put our name up at the podium, turned around, there he was.
Right.
So we had a nice conversation. It was unique, and we haven't kept in touch. We had some disagreements, differences in philosophy, and we had a good talk, and I think we probably will be talking in the future.
What are your memories of with the Midnight Express, you and Tully? You started the angle with them, and then eventually you guys left.
Well, Bobby Eaton and I were like two brothers. We were as close as Rick and I were close. Bobby lived a rock's throw behind me, so we traveled together a lot on some of the driving shots. Rick would fly some of the longer ones, we would drive them. It was just a luxury of being the world champion. So we traveled together a lot, and I think him and Dennis Condrey were probably the best team I ever saw, at that time. Purely manipulative, utilizing their manager. Cornette was right there. I mean, they were great. And they were classic matches. We didn't get to wrestle them, obviously, as long as we should have, because that was right about the time we left.
Now, right. Now, I guess, how did your negotiations come about with Vince?
There were some incidents. Let's see. There were some incidents in the front office of where we're going to be sold to Turner. Are we not? Are we going bankrupt? Are we going belly up? I know that Jim Crockett was in a lot of financial duress. At that point in time, we were as hot as you could possibly be. We did the angle with the Midnight Express, and coming out of the Great American Bashes, all the advances were actually up. The matches were Luger and Flair, us against the Midnight Express. And we did the new Charlotte Coliseum, we did like 20,000 people, which is near capacity, which is huge. We couldn't get a straight answer from Jim Crockett. He had made us a promise, contract-wise. We had done a pay-per-view from Long Island earlier. He had made us a promise on a payoff that didn't come through. Basically, he was swerving us, and we knew there was a point in time that if we're going to make a change, that was the time to do it. I put out a feeler, and he said, absolutely. Something happened in Houston that wasn't to our liking as far as being just treatment on television. Had nothing to do with winning or losing or who we were wrestling, but there was just an incident that I'd rather not go into. I addressed it with Jim Crockett. He didn't handle it properly. So I went and picked up the phone and called Vince McMahon.
Was Rick shocked that you guys were leaving, or was he standing behind you guys?
He didn't believe it.
He didn't believe it?
Yep, he didn't believe it. I called Vince that night. He said, there'll be a first-class plane ticket sitting there for you in the morning. We flew to Stanford. He picked us up in the limo, took us to his house. We sat out by the pool, put the deal together, flew back to Philly that night, walked in and told Dusty, told Jim Crockett, this is our last night.
Right, and you lost the belts in Philly.
We lost the belts to the Midnight Express. Bobby beat me right in the middle with leg off the top, Alabama Jam, and we left. Rick didn't believe it. You know, he believed, well, these guys are blowing off steam. The next afternoon, we had an afternoon show in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and he called. We weren't there. Then it occurred to him. It was time for TV to start. We weren't there, and he cracked.
How did the rest of the boys react?
There's probably a lot that wanted to see us go. There was probably a lot that didn't. The guys that were confident in their position and their abilities, I'm sure, hated the fact that deal was over, because the Horsemen carried Jim Crockett Promotions, for a long time. Drew a lot of money, and I'm not saying we were the entire company. That's the farthest thing from the truth. The Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, Magnum, Nikita, Ivan Koloff, we had a huge array of talent. Dusty, obviously all these guys, the Garvins, everybody. But we were the consistently top 3 matches, every night for years. And to see that broken up wasn't good for the wrestling business. It certainly wasn't good for the company. And I'm sure the guys that wanted to move up the ladder were tickled to death.
Right. What were your initial impressions of Vince?
Probably the most intelligent, articulate, smoothest guy I've ever met. He was the classiest. He would come up and he would talk to you for 5 minutes, and when he walked off, you felt like you had to get your feet back on the ground. He made you feel that good about yourself. And go on record as saying the 14 months I was there, they treated me as a company better than I'd ever been treated in my life.
That was one of my questions. Did he make good on all his promises?
Everything. Everything. And then some. The only reason I left, period, is I had a 3-year-old son, which is my oldest now, and when he started, we were gone 24 days a month, bar none. That was the schedule. 24 days gone. We were never in Charlotte. We never ran any towns that I could drive back and forth to, and it cracked me. He was crying, "Daddy, when are you coming home?" And I cracked, and I just told him, "Vince, I got to go home."
Right.
And that's where I made the deal to come back here, because they were only working 8 days a month in WCW,
Right.
and that was it. Basically just doing television. And the difference in 8 and 24, do the math.
Now, how different were the locker rooms from the NWA days when you were in WWF?
The politics is completely different. They have very stringent locker room rules that are unsaid. Some are said, some are unsaid. There's cardinal rules, things you don't break. Most of the guys that go to work for Vince, if they're allowed to, they stay until he runs them off. It is such a good place to work, and you make a good living. And if he puts you in that one spot for 6, 8 months, and you have one of those $500,000 runs, or end up doing $1 million for the year, you're set up for life in essence. I know a lot of guys, that had a run with Hogan that have saved $500,000 in 6 months. That's big money.
Right.
That's huge money. So the guys there always were very protective of their slot. The politics was such that they tried to keep any shady stuff out of their locker room. They didn't want locker room lawyers, as we call them, walking around,
Right.
Knocking the company, taking the guys down, because the grind was so bad. And as far as working so many days, that dressing room had to be your sanctuary. It had to be a place that you could take a breath and relax. Everything needed to be positive. And that's kind of the way the guys police themselves up there, and they keep it that way. WCW, the crowds were so bad, and everyone was down, and this guy was jealous of what this guy was making, and da-da-da-da-da. It was a different environment.
How did you and Tully get paired with Bobby? Because you guys were great talkers. Did you feel you guys needed a manager? Or?
No, but the beauty of it was, at that time, we were scared to death that Vince was going to do what he did with a lot of guys, or most guys, change their character,
Right.
but he didn't. Gave us a different name, obviously, but didn't change our look. And when he put Bobby with us, the only guys Bobby were managing at that time was Haku and the Giant. And those were, the Giant was the Giant, for God's sakes, and Haku was the top guy. It elevated us. It gave us immediate recognition, acceptance with the WWF crowd. So it was a very positive thing. Do we need him to do the talking? Obviously not.
Right.
But Bobby Heenan was Bobby Heenan. of
Right.
course he is.
What was Hulk Hogan like in the locker room at the time?
All business. Hulk was all business. I never saw the what's the word I'm looking for? I never saw Terry Bollea. I always saw Hulk Hogan. He had his own locker room. He stayed there. When he came out, it was time for business. When he went back in his locker room, that was the end of it. I never saw him in a different light other than that. He was always a gentleman. He always said hello, always shook your hand. He just didn't get to know you personally, because he had, again, him as a champion, imagine if my schedule was what it was, how many days off did he have? He was doing personal appearances. He's on Leno, he's on Letterman, he's doing all these different things. Well, those all had to come on a day off. So he probably didn't have a day off, or God knows when.
Right. Now, your first series of matches over there with the Rockers, did you see potential in Shawn Michaels at the time?
Both of them. Performance-wise, they were the best team we ever wrestled.
Yeah, great matches on Saturday Night's Main Event and stuff.
Oh, God, they were so good. They were better than the Rock and Roll Express from a work rate level. These other guys were so over, Ricky and Robert were so over at that particular time. It's the same scenario but different, because Shawn Michaels could do anything. Good Lord, Jannetty was great, but Shawn Michaels is that unique guy that comes along every so often, and he could do it all. And they trusted us that we weren't going to kill them, we weren't going to drop them on their head, try to cripple them, and we had some incredible matches with those guys.
How about Demolition?
Barry Darsow is one of the best friends I have on this planet. Smash. And up there, and they were their version of the Road Warriors, and big, solid. Tully had a reputation going up there. Guys were a little leery of him, so they whacked Tully around pretty much, but Demolition was a piece of cake for me too. I loved wrestling those guys.
Were the demands less on ring work in the WWF, or was it more showmanship? Did you guys still work as hard as you did in NWA, or?
Yeah, harder.
Right.
The ring was harder. A lot of times we would do 30-minute, we would go 30 minutes through the time limit. I think when you were at a level like we were, which was upper middle, we weren't on top, You had to perform. I mean, it was like Bret Hart and Kurt Hennig, and you had all these guys that were above you and below you that were tremendous performers. If you didn't do something to stand out, you weren't going to be there very long.
Right.
And we knew that. So, I mean, you would go out and do your best with the bushwhackers, but that's what it was. There were guys that were there because Vince loved them and they were entertaining and the kids liked them, and that was it. But business being business, you got out there with the Rockers, you gave them 25 minutes of ball-busting, incredible match. And I think that's what helped us make, an impression up there with him.
Was there ever talk of Vince trying to break you and Tully up as a team, or no?
No. Not that I ever heard of.
Okay. Can you compare working to a big show in the WWF compared to working for a major show with Jim Crockett? What were the differences?
WWF is night and day, period. From the lighting grid to the pyro, to the clarity of the picture, to the way it's promoted, to the way it's built. It's an event. It's not a wrestling show, it's an event. Jim Crockett, it was a wrestling show. Vince he has spent the money to put together a product that's unparalleled. That's all I can tell you. And the production qualities and the organization, that's it.
What are your memories of your first matches with Strikeforce at WrestleMania?
We only wrestled him one time. That's it. The one time at the show. And again, performance quality, who's better than Tito Santana and Rick Martel?
Right.
The one thing I hated is it wasn't budgeted for much time. And on those shows, that's the way it goes. You don't have a lot of time. It was real short. I think the quality of the quantity was good, but it was a one-time gig and we never wrestled them again.
Right.
That kind of disappointed me because
You could have some good matches with those guys.
Would have loved it.
How was it dealing with the exposure in the WWF at the time compared to the NWA?
Funny thing, as hot as the Horsemen were, and now we traveled the country too, but the power of the WWF television went into so many markets, and it was in such great time slots, that after being up there 14 months and coming back here and being here all those years, we were bigger stars. I was. When I came back here, it was like a whole new group of people knew me.
Right.
And they knew me as Brainbuster now. It wasn't Horseman. They knew both, but the strength of his TV at that time through syndication was just so much stronger. We relied mostly on cable. Few syndicated markets. I think he was syndicated in 300 markets or something at that time.
And you guys also worked a lot with the Hart Foundation.
Yeah.
Bret and Jim.
Again, Bret Hart, consummate wrestler. Animal. As far as Anvil goes, an animal. He just another 550-pound bencher, strong as he could be. It's like running into a fire hydrant. Not as polished as Bret, but oil and water. But that's what made him a good team.
Right. What was Ultimate Warrior like at the time?
Never got to know him.
No.
Kept to himself, very quiet, very intense, incredible physique, obviously. And he was a guy that Vince took and decided he was going to make a star that wasn't a great wrestler. Probably will never be a great wrestler, but was just good enough that his look and his charisma and the way he was promoted made a good package, and it worked.
You've noticed in the World Wrestling Federation, how was Vince with you guys in your final days?
It was kind of touchy there. The reason we gave notice was, number one, he had gave us X amount of dollars that we had made the year before, and he said, you're going to make more than that, it's no problem. But he didn't quote us, okay, you'll make this. He just said, I guarantee you'll make more than you made last year. Well, at this point in time, we were 6 months into the fiscal year, we were $50,000 behind that. So this was before I had completely just cracked up and was going to leave one way or the other. So we just said, listen, here's what you told us, here's where we are financially. Either catch us up or let us go. He said, well, let me think about this. And he was sitting there putting on his shoes to go work out. Well, he didn't even go to the gym. And for Vince not to go to the gym, let us know that it meant something to him. Because every day at TV, he would get his business dealings done. Then in the afternoon, he'd go work out. So he stayed there, and he said, "Let me talk to you. Let me talk to you at the next TV." And at that point in time, we did TV, I believe, every 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
He thought about it. He came in. He said, "I've thought about this, guys. If you want to go, I'll give you a release. Just give me a 90-day notice." So we said, fine. We'd already put the deal together with WCW anyway. So he was good about it. We started working our 90-day notice. He didn't mistreat us. We were on the Saturday Night Main Event, which I think we talked about, those matches with the Rockers, which was a privilege and a hell of a payoff at that point in time. Because you got paid from NBC and you got paid from Vince. It was a double payoff. So normally he would have took us off that because we're leaving, but he let us stay on there. And actually my money went up. It was incredible. Usually in those days when you're on your way out, your money went down. My money went up. And I think Vince is so smart, he was letting me know, you're making a mistake by leaving here. You know, look what it could be.
Right.
Because it almost doubled. And I ended up having the biggest year I'd had in the business by far. And makes you think. You know, I was thinking, I said, I know I'm doing the right thing. I'm going home to be with my son and my wife, but whew, potential to make some money up here.
Right.
So he treated us well. He did.
How different was WCW under Turner's ownership when you returned?
Totally corporate. Now it wasn't wrestling people running it. Jim Hurd was the boss.
Right.
Jim Hurd didn't know anything about wrestling. Thought he did. Thought he had a concept. He was just a fan that thought that he could run a wrestling company. And he was just a casual fan. He didn't know the inner workings. To be and I firmly believe this, to be on the business end, you can be a suit. What was the question?
We were just talking about how different WCW was with Ted Turner.
Jim Hurd.
Oh yeah, you were talking about Jim Hurd.
Oh, okay. I think you can be a suit from IBM or anywhere else and come in and do the business dealings. But to be able to assess hypothetically what a wrestler's worth, where he should be used, you got to have a background in wrestling. I'm sorry, to be the hands-on guy, not the business guy, the money guy. And you have to, as the money guy, you have to have someone advise you. You know, because you can't look at a guy because he's got a tremendous physique and say, this guy's worth this much. You've got to know his background, what his drawing potential is. Is he a good businessman? Is he reliable? Is he durable? Is he going to be able to work 200 days a year for you, you know, and beat his body up and still be at work? Jim Hurd couldn't assess that. He wasn't qualified. So the company never took a step forward under his leadership.
What was the locker room like? Was it different from when you returned?
It was the inmates running the asylum.
Still is today, sort of.
Never before like it was then.
Right.
The guys did what they want to. You know, there was a core of guys. Because let's face it, and as bad as that sounds, they knew a hell of a lot more than the guy that was running the place. So why not? The guy was an idiot.
Right.
That's all I could tell you. Jim Hurd was an idiot.
Now, when you came back, you did the surprise angle where you came in with Rick, and I guess you feuded with Bud Sawyer and Muda.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Like I said, Buzz, it was like being in a bar fight every night. And I don't know if Buzz didn't like me, if Buzz didn't like anybody, but he was just especially mean and especially tough. And Buzz was badass. He was one of those real badasses of the era. And we got into some pretty serious scrapes, and Muda was as polished as anybody. I mean,
right.
Muda was great. And it was, I did not enjoy the matches, let's just put it that way. Number one, I was cast in the wrong role. I was the good guy, hugely miscast, and fish out of water. Thank God it was short-lived.
Right. Now, also, I guess at the time, Sting was with the Horsemen, and then eventually you guys turned on Sting.
And that was, I mean, he was like a Horseman for a week
Right.
or something.
Right.
And that's where we would have started. That would have been one of those pivotal points where the company would started to turn around a little bit. When that angle, which was well done, and you really got a grip on what a great talker Ole Anderson was during that interview,
Right.
when he was saying, Sting, look, time's running out. He convinced me.
Right.
Sting blew his knee out that night, and we lost it for 6 months, and all that momentum was just gone. You don't replace a Sting, not at that point in time. And that hurt the company big time.
What are your memories of your series with the Steiners at the time?
God, I've wrestled the Steiners, I bet you 1,000 times with 5 different partners. Beat them one time, if you can believe that. Bob Eaton and I.
Right.
That was during the Bill Watts era, which means I'm 1 and 999.
Right.
That says it all. I don't think I can beat Rick Steiner's 8-year-old kid. It's just something in the genetics.
How about Sid Vicious? How did he wind up being a Horseman?
We recruited Sid because of the success we had had with Luger, having a power guy. You got to have a power guy in a unit if you're going to go up against Steiners, Road Warriors, all these guys. We just didn't have a guy that could physically match up, and Sid was the guy at that time. He just worked, and he was so intimidating looking. I mean, he was going to give us that edge, and it worked for a while, and then I think some front office problems, went south, and Sid went north.
Right.
I think it was one of those deals.
Eventually, Barry Windham came back as well, I believe. And,
Yeah.
How did Ole Anderson wind up leaving?
As far as company,
I think he left the company, yeah.
now was this when he was in the front office?
Yeah.
That we're looking at.
Yeah.
I want to say they brought Ole back, which was right prior to Bischoff,
Right.
and they weren't paying him much. I mean, really weren't paying. I mean, it was something ridiculous they were paying him, and the worm had started to turn, and the business had started to change, and Ole's views were kind of viewed as old school and dinosaur, and he was starting to clash with some of the younger guys, and I think it was just, hey, for this kind of money, who needs it?
Right.
And I think he just took a walk.
Now, you and Barry also had some great matches with Ron Simmons and Butch Reed when they were
Yes.
called Doom, managed by Woman. What
Yeah.
are your memories of those matches?
Another great team. Butch was hilarious out of the ring. One of those personalities, he just kept you laughing. He reminds me of the Cat now,
Right.
WCW. I mean, he's just a guy you want to be around. He just keeps you laughing. But Butch Reed's a badass. He's street smart, badass. Ron Simmons is in a league of his own. Ron Simmons is a Steiner. Anybody that knows him will tell you that. Funny story, the Steiners used to go around the old days in the locker room playing with the guys. They'd tape them up, tape them to the ceiling, tape them to a chair. They did what they wanted to, and it was just, they
Right.
was playing. But that was their way of entertaining themselves for downtime in the dressing room. And I looked at Ron one day and I said, Ron, why don't they tape you up and all that? And he just looked at me and went, and I said, there's the answer.
Right.
And I think he had everybody convinced. He is the most explosive guy, and I'm talking about whip on a power slam on the way over, you're gone. It's just incredible the strength he has. And Ron doesn't go to the gym. Keep this in mind. Ron was a 600-pound bencher, and when in the late 80s, early 90s, he might have went to the gym 4 days a month and could do a 500 bench any day of the week. It's uncanny. He's a genetic freak. But they were a polished team. Teddy Long being with those guys was a great addition. Teddy Long was a great talker, I thought. And put him with those guys, they made a pretty good tandem. Of course, Woman's a lot better to look at.
Right.
We all appreciated that.
Right. What are your memories of your matches with Bobby Eaton?
He's like Brad Armstrong. You don't know how good he is. You can look at Bobby from afar and say, well, that guy's pretty good. You don't realize how good he is till you're in there with him. He's so smooth. Bobby Eaton's hands are about twice the size of mine, and he can light you up. You know, Bobby, again, is not a muscle guy or anything. He's just a well-polished, smart, in the ring, a lot smarter in the ring than he is out of the ring. Trust me. Just a great wrestler. And, again, that was a learning experience.
How different was the locker room when Rick left?
Again, there's a lot of guys wanting to see him go so they could elevate themselves. Anyone that was in tune to the wrestling business knew that the balance of power went to Vince at that point. You don't replace Ric Flair.
Right.
It's an impossibility. Our champion, however many times it was at that point, just went to the enemy, so he had both champions.
Right, right.
It's hard to play a chess game when the other guy's got two queens.
How did you react personally when you heard Rick was going to go?
I wanted him to go when we went, and Rick had talked about going with us. That was part of the deal, because we'd had some blow-ups with Crockett, and we had went in and had some meetings, and it was the final straw with us, and we had talked, well, we'll just all go. If we all would have went, we would all still be there.
Right.
It would have been
Amazing.
Can you imagine what Vince McMahon would have done with the Four Horsemen?
Amazing.
And I came up with the name, so in essence it was mine. It wasn't like Crockett
Right.
had it trademarked. We could have took it with us if Vince would have wanted it. Can you imagine what he would have done with that?
Would have been huge.
Oh, that's that being right underneath Hulk Hogan,
Right.
wrestling for the main event. Or my God, Rick wrestling Hogan, you know, and then us right underneath there. I mean, God, it would have been incredible. But he didn't go. He should have went. And then when he went, I was glad to see him go, because I knew Vince McMahon would treat him with the same class that Rick had treated the business. But I knew it was also too late. It was a couple of years too late. He should have went earlier.
How did you wind up with the Dangerous Alliance? And what was your relationship with Paul Heyman? Outside the ring.
I like Paul E. Paul E. was Paul E. was a BSer, but if you could cut through the BS, he was a pretty fair guy. He was a guy that wished things to be a way so much that he actually saw them being that way when they really weren't, if that makes any sense. The Dangerous Alliance was a great group. If you look, just break down the talent that was involved. I mean, you look at that group of wrestlers, it may have been the greatest talent group of all time. Rick Rude, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko, Steve Austin, Arn Anderson, Medusa, Paul Heyman. Am I missing somebody?
I think they were the key guys.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty damn good talent roster. And these were guys that were still in their prime, still working, working order, no bad injuries at that point. Problem is, WCW has never been the vehicle to promote such a group. And it's one of our shortcomings, and I'm not blaming anybody, because at this point in time, this interview's being done, I work for WCW, and I'm loyal. I've been with them 10 years straight, take the 14 months out, and I've been with them 15 years straight that I went to work for Vince, because I still consider the NWA WCW.
Right.
So I'm loyal, always have been, but our shortcoming is promoting our product, getting it out there and making these guys bigger than life, and Vince does that. He's the best at it.
I was going to ask you about WCW later. What are your memories of your matches with you and Bobby against Dustin and Ricky Steamboat?
I've got one that stands out. We're wrestling in the Omni, 1 hour time limit, 56-minute mark. Dustin Rhodes, who was still a kid at the time, completely ran out of gas, and he just, I think he started hallucinating or something. He started screaming in the ring. I think I had an arm lock or arm bar or something on him, and he just starts going, ah! Ah! And I'm looking at Bobby. And I'm looking at the referee, and he's, ah! And I tagged Bobby. It scared me. I thought this guy was flipping out. He was flipping out. I tagged Bobby. Bobby gets in, grabbed it. Same thing. I guess the guy was so blown up,
Right.
he flipped out. And it went like 59 minutes or something. And I think Steamboat caught a fall on Bobby or something. But it was one of the strangest things I've ever encountered. The next day, I came up to Dustin and I said, you know, it was a tough match. What's the matter with you? He didn't have an answer. I don't think he even remembered it. I think
Right.
if you've ever wrestled, if you've ever done anything for an hour straight, it's a long time.
Right. Right.
You know, and I think he just blew sky high.
Well,
That's a horrible memory of wrestling two guys of that quality, but along the same lines, Ricky Steamboat is probably the best babyface that ever lived. And, you know, I say that without any contention. You know, he was just the best. He was the smoothest. He had the best physique. He was the best looking. You know, he had good looking gear. I mean, the guy was just across the board was just, you know, he was always tanned. And he's a gentleman.
Right.
Ricky Steamboat is one of those classic, put him in a capsule, you know, look at him 50 years from now, and he's your prototype for what you want to be, a good guy wrestler. He's the guy.
what was the vibe like in the locker room when Bill Watts came in?
Dread. Anybody that ever worked for him before? We didn't know, you know, what he was going to bring, but when we found out what he was doing, it was horrible. And the word we got was Bill Watts came in under the pretense, don't pay me a salary, just pay me out of what I can save the company. Well, the numbers didn't go up. The houses didn't go up. He just cut everybody's salary, and that's how he made his living, and me included. He cut mine in half, and I took it personally because I have a family. And thank God I was smart enough to maneuver myself into a position to do the angle with his kid, sit home and get paid for 4 months, partial pay, but whatever it was, you know, to sit home and get paid for 4 months and not do anything doesn't suck. And I was smart enough to maneuver myself in a position, but he was just, and the only thing he could tell me, the thing that really drove me crazy was he said, you and Bobby are the best team we have here. You're the best working team we have here. You're a great talker, but you've been here too long. Now, Bret Hart had been with Vince at that point for 10 years. Other guys have been up there 10 years. I didn't understand that. What do you mean I've been here too long? So I go from this TV to that TV. It's still wrestling. Most people don't know the difference.
Right.
So you're going to let your two best performers, in your words that you're saying, go to the competitor because we've been here too long. I never understood that. I never will understand it. He was just cleaning house. He knew if he took our salaries and we went away, he wasn't going to replace us with anybody. He was just putting money in his pocket. He was wrong, and it was a lousy deal.
Were all the boys pretty upset about Eric Watts' push at the time?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Well, it was worse than Dustin Rhodes because Dustin Rhodes,
At least Dustin had talent.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. He was talented, and he was humble, and Dustin was a tremendous performer. Eric wasn't,
Right.
and isn't. There's no reflection on Eric. Eric was just, you know, he was put in a position by his dad, but, you know, who wouldn't have taken it?
How did you wind up working for Smoky Mountain Wrestling for the one show?
Again, I was on hiatus. They really didn't know what to do with me. It was kind of between. This was during that period that I was off.
Right.
It was a 4-month period. Well, actually, it was a 6-month period. I think I got hurt wrestling Eric. We did the parking lot angle, and that was in like October. So I was off November and December, the last 2 months of my contract. Then I was off 6 months. So during that hiatus, Gary Juster booked me, Smoky Mountain. I was due to start back 1st of May, I think, with WCW. So he just booked me out for a shot over there. And we went over. That was a lot of fun. Jim Cornette treated me well. Smoky Mountain treated me well. And I had a lot of fun. I worked like 3 shows for him.
Now, when Rick finally came back to WCW, did you expect him to reform the Horsemen immediately, or
No.
no? Just
And I really didn't want to. Like I said, each time you try to reform that deal, it just got more watered down and watered down and watered down. And if it wasn't going to get the push by the company, why do it? But the minute he walked in the door,
Right.
all the fans started this. It's what they wanted, so we gave it to them.
Now, eventually, Paul Roma came into the group. Now, how close was Tully coming back before Paul Roma entered the Horsemen?
Very close. He was actually at a show in Texas, and I think what Tully wanted was way out of line, and the number of days he wanted to work was way out of line because the rest of us weren't on a set number of days. I think Tully wanted to work 10 days a month for X number of dollars, and that wouldn't have worked. And if they would have given it to him, the rest of us would have balked.
Right.
You know, I certainly would have. You know, so we were the ones that were getting this deal back together for him to come in and get the gravy. That didn't work for me. And that didn't matter if it was Tully Blanchard or who it was. It just was wrong.
Now, you and Rick had some great matches with Steve Austin and Brian Pillman.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories of those matches and the angles leading up to it with Flair for the Gold and all
Just
that?
that they belonged together. Pillman and Austin belonged together. Their personalities and everything was so good. And I saw something in Austin. The guy was so fluid, and he had a personality that was just, I mean, he was just himself. And they couldn't figure out what to make him. And I actually said one day up in the office, and I was starting to become part of the office at that point, I said, guys, let's just let him be what he is, a hunting, fishing, tobacco chewing guy. It just kind of bounced around the walls, and nobody heard what I was saying. Well, that's what Vince made him. But those guys were great together. The entertainment value, God bless Brian Pillman. He was, the loose cannon deal was the greatest performance of all time, and I'm not sure that really wasn't him.
Right. What are your memories of your matches with Mick Foley, Cactus Jack?
I'm not sure I ever wrestled him.
Really? I don't know why I even heard that then.
If I did, it was such an isolated incident that I
Okay.
don't remember it. I regret that I never did.
What was Kip Fry like to work for?
Tremendous. Matter of fact, we had a tremendous deal put together right before he got fired.
Right.
I wished he would have hung around a little longer.
Now, I think also at the time you also had some series of matches with Steven Regal and Paul Orndorff.
Mm-hmm. Paul was I was a big fan of Paul Orndorff's. Back to the days when I was a fan, and the advice that he had given me, and I really enjoyed. Paul and I's styles were very similar, which I enjoyed. Regal was one of those guys that was light years ahead of his time too. The stuff that he does, it was like talking Latin to me. I had no concept of how to counter it and what to do, and he kind of just danced around me, made me look a little foolish because I felt pretty inept out there with him. He was so good, to be honest with you. But that English style.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think also around this time, it might have been a little bit before or after, I'm not sure, you also went to New Japan and you worked some matches with Steve Austin. You worked one match over there. It was a total tournament, wasn't it? TV total tournament, maybe?
I
in Japan?
wrestled a match with Austin.
Right.
Yeah. It was the first day over that we got there, I think, on TV. And if you've ever made the trip to Japan, the first day you're miserable.
Right.
The flight's so bad, and you wake up all night long because you've slept on the plane, and it's this time here and that time there, and the first day is not good. Usually the second day you've gotten it out of you. I don't think we had near the quality match we could have had. It was, if I remember it right, he was a little sluggish. I was real sluggish, and the quality wasn't there.
All right.
Which I regret.
What were your early impressions of Eric Bischoff when he first came into power?
Good. The guy had a vision, and Eric is a great talker, and he's a very personable guy when he wants to be, and he has a vision. He has a way of selling you on his vision, and it was at that time, he's the first guy that said, we can overtake Vince. And he said, I'm going to put the pieces in place to do it.
Did you believe him, or?
No, to be honest with you, but I was happy with the concept because everyone up until that time was so busy saying what was wrong with us as individuals, as wrestlers. We've been here too long. We need this instead of this. We need new character. No one had ever said, hey, let's go after the other guy. Let's take you guys. I'm going to put my confidence in you guys, and let's go after the other guy. It's the first time anyone had said that. That was a new, refreshing thought, a new concept for me, and I liked it.
Now, when Hulk Hogan came in, was the locker room any different? I mean, were people like, oh no, Hogan's in the locker room now? Or?
Again, guys that were knowledgeable of the business, that knew who and what he was and what he meant. I knew that Hulk Hogan was another 5,000 people in the house no matter where you went.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Promote it, don't promote it. Just put his name out front. And that's another 5,000 people. And I knew that because I'd been in New York and I saw the guy was a demigod. Never seen a reaction like that in my life to anything. When Hulk came through that curtain, good Lord. And I knew that it was going to be positive.
Right. Now, around this time, you also did maybe one angle, and then you worked one house show, One Worlds Collide for ECW. You worked with, I think it was you and Terry Funk against Bobby Eaton and Sabu. How did that come about?
Again, they booked us out and booked Bobby and I out. I think this was still kind of when we're in that interim period. And the story was that when Bobby and I were partners for that year and a half, whatever it was, and when we were let go, when I got hurt, Bobby didn't wait on me. You know, he just went on. He went to Smoky Mountain, and did his own thing, and that was the story. And they kind of carried that theme through into the ECW TV. And we did the same thing there, and that was one of those deals. It was horrible to watch.
As far as what? As far as working?
Well, Terry started with Sabu,
right,
and this was their home turf. And as I saw it develop, I knew what they were doing. They were protecting themselves. We were just passing through. We were there for one day and one day only. I knew it, they knew it, and they were taking care of themselves. Now, the match started. These guys fought all over the building, up in the balcony, all the way down. Bobby Eaton and I were standing there, scratching our ass for 5 minutes, literally, watching this.
Right.
They roll back in the ring, they're both bleeding, and they come over and tag us. Now, as a wrestler, there's nowhere to go from there.
Right.
What do you do? I mean, they fell out of the balcony, they went through tables, they've done everything. So we went in, I grabbed the headlock, sat down with it. The place went silent.
Right.
And I just looked at the ref, and the ref went, you know, I don't know if he expected us to try to outdo those guys or what. And I said, pal, I'm passing through. And we just, you know, went through a little bit of a match and tagged out, and they did their thing, and the match was concluded. But they knew what they were doing, trust me. From a wrestler perspective, they were protecting their own self.
Was there any truth into this that Sabu said not to work his neck, and then you told him not to work your neck, and then somehow you guys started working each other's necks? Because I know you had a bad neck at the time, and I know Sabu had a bad neck.
I've got a faint memory of something, stay away from my neck or something. It's not clear.
Okay.
It's not clear.
How different was Paulie now as a boss and a booker compared to Paulie as your manager in WCW?
Again, I caught him in a time where Paulie didn't own the company. I think it
Todd
was.
Gordon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't deal with him on that level. He was great to me. I came in, had a good time, got my money, and left.
Okay. Now, you went back to WCW, I believe, and you were part of the stud stable with Robert Fuller. And you had some matches. I guess actually you worked with Terry Funk, and you had a series of matches with Dustin Rhodes again.
Yep.
What was that?
That was great. To wrestle Terry Funk in a non-ECW environment was great, because he was one of the greatest of all time, and a legend. And for, like I said, again, I keep referring back to guys my age that understand the business. I mean, that's an honor. It's like being out there with Harley Race, or the guys of that nature. Jack Briscoe, whoever they are, Ric Flair, Dusty, all those guys. It's an honor to be out there with them. Bunkhouse Bunk, a lot of guys don't know, is a great wrestler. I mean, he was cast into a one-dimensional role. But guys like him and Robert Fuller and all those guys, I mean, they've been around forever. They're great performers. Terry Funk and those guys with Robert Fuller talking for him was a pretty good tandem. But the cowboy thing has been done to death.
Right.
Nobody cared. If there was a scenario that they could have been recast in, I think it would have been great. So I enjoyed the time being with old school guys that knew what they were doing. But again, I was miscast too, I think.
Now, eventually Hunky came in, and he only stayed for a brief period of time, Hunky Tonk Man, and he was feuding with, I believe it was Johnny B. Bad, and then I guess you replaced him in the feud.
That night.
Right.
Again, you go back to the well, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've wrestled twice, 3 times. It's like I was the old standby utility guy. Honky didn't like what was laid out for him. He went and got on the phone, called his missus. She said, I don't like it either, come home. And he went home. They were scrambling. They had nothing to do. If I have one regret in this business,
That's one of my questions later on, but go ahead.
I'll just cover it now. If I have one regret, it's the fact that I've always been looked at as middle of the road, never a top guy, upper middle guy, top guy, but not a top guy. They have never needed me until they needed me. And then when they needed me, it was to fill any void, whether it was the top void, the bottom void, and to be taken for granted until they're really in a pinch, and you go out and you pull one out for them, because I wrestled twice that night. And to pull one out and do it every time for them on a consistent basis and never have anyone, and I've had it said a couple of times, and I won't go into that, to just say, hey, you know, I was wrong about you. You know, the fact that you don't walk in the door and everybody go, oh my God, that's so-and-so. Sometimes, you know, that's not that important. It's what you do bell to bell, night after night, year after year, and consistently that makes a difference. And, you know, that's what I want to be remembered for. The guy never gave the best performance in the history of wrestling, but he never gave a shitty one either. I can't remember a shitty one that he was in.
Right.
You know, and there's very few people can say that.
It's true.
You know?
That's true. Did you ever have any problems putting over Renegade that one match?
I didn't. Everybody else did.
Right.
Except the people that put it together. And I knew, again, it was a Van Hammer, a PN News. It was
Right.
a situation that wasn't going to fly. The poor kid, the kid was a great person that I knew of. Very respectful, very nice. He was put out there way before he should have been. And he failed miserably. And I think his failure, God bless him, cost him his life. And that's a horrible thing to say. But he was brought in, good Lord, as Hulk Hogan's partner. And he fell off the mountainside, and nobody gave him a parachute. Nobody even, you know, told him why. And I don't think he ever understood how he fell so far so fast. And I think, you know, not knowing him, but I think it's a horrible tragedy. It just shows you what stardom can do to you.
All right. Did the atmosphere change a lot when Hogan came in, as far as in the locker room? We touched on it a little bit. I mean, is there a lot of politics going on now at this time?
Well, Hulk didn't have a huge ripple effect across the locker room as much as he had across the front office, because Hulk has creative control. And, you know, as far as the character Hulk Hogan, he had ultimate say in what happened. And he knew how to protect himself. And that's what kept him on top all these years, being able to take care of himself. But if you're sitting up there in a booking committee and you're spending 8 hours a day, 3 days a week, and a guy walks in at 4 or 5 o'clock on Monday and changes what you have planned, and we're coming up live in 2 hours, that causes mass confusion.
Right.
Because it doesn't just change his particular match, it changes it across the board. You know?
So it's a problem.
So it was a problem for those guys that had to be the quick fix. Ultimately, thank God there was people with their butts in those seats that could book on the fly and change it and make it work. because this was right in the midst of Nitro was building and doing well. If people would have saw the mass confusion that was going on a lot of times at 6 o'clock behind the scenes, you wouldn't have believed it.
Right.
You would not believe it could be that unorganized at 6:30 and come across that good at 8 o'clock. You'd never believe it.
Now, you also had some great matches finally with Ric Flair. They did the thing with you and Ric Flair.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories of that?
It's the only time I've ever puked before a match
Really?
from nerves.
Wow.
Asheville, North Carolina. To be honest with you, I never wanted to ever wrestle Rick, just because, to me, it was real. He's my best friend. And to go out there and wrestle him, number one, I don't think anybody bought it. The only thing that came from it is I got to up close and personal, see how good he was. You can observe as a partner, but you got to be there to know how good they are. And I wanted to see how the fans bought it. To have even 20% of the people get behind you when you're wrestling a guy of that legendary status, it's a huge victory. And in Asheville, North Carolina, where he's a god, any of the Carolinas, Virginia, this is a stronghold. It was a personal victory for me just to be able to stand in there and not get booed out of the building. And it was a learning experience, but I was so nervous. I did the pre-match interview, and I was supposed to go straight to the ring. And halfway there, I had to stop and puke. My stomach was just in knots. So.
It's great stuff, though.
Unbelievable. Thank you.
What are your memories of Brian Pillman at the time? Like when he did the whole Bookerman thing with Kevin Sullivan. Were you personally?
He was at his best.
Right.
And I was involved in a lot of that. He was at his personal best. And that was one of those deals that the guys in the locker room didn't know.
Did you take it? Well, did you know at the time?
I didn't know.
Okay. Well, did you take it personal that he was trying to work the guys in the locker room? Or?
No. Because I was willing to do anything or be a part of anything that would help us stay on top. Get on top and stay on top. I just have been so loyal to whatever company. When I worked for Vince, I was loyal to him. When I'm here, I'm loyal. And I want us to be the best we can, because if this company is thriving, I've got a job for a long time. If you got kids, there is no call out in the real world for beat-up ex-40-year-old wrestlers. I want this thing to go on and thrive and do well. And that was pretty much my sentiment. I have no political aspirations, or
right.
I just want everything to go well. And if that had me in the dark, so be it.
What are your matches, or actually, what are your memories of working with Vader?
Oh God.
Steph.
Oh my God. Yeah, he almost killed Rick and I both, and we wrestled him in a handicap match. And he almost killed us both in Daytona.
All right.
Again, I don't know how anybody did anything with Vader. He's 450 pounds. You couldn't reach around him. The guy was strong. He could move. He was an animal. And red-headed, for God's sakes.
Right.
Fishy white and red-headed and 450 pounds is a bad combination. He's all man.
When you guys heard that WCW was thinking of going head-to-head with Vince live on Mondays, did you think it was a good idea, or did you say, oh no?
I didn't see the sense of it. I didn't see, why would we split the audience when we could go on Tuesday and get all the audience? As it turned out, it was a wrestle fest for the fans. They got the very best that the very best minds in the business could put together every Monday night for absolutely nothing.
Right.
It blew me away that anybody would buy a pay-per-view, because Nitros were better than pay-per-view.
I was going to ask you, do you think it hurt the business?
Oh, God, in the long run, it killed us, because we burn up every combination.
They were doing Sting Hogan on Monday nights when they could have...
One Monday.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
It came one Monday, and that was it.
Right.
When you used to sit down and when I was a fan, I would open up a wrestling magazine and it had dream matches. What matches would you like to see? Check your dream match. You knew you were never going to see them. We gave them to them. And one time only, on Monday. Every segment, they got a dream match for 3 straight hours for 2 straight years.
Right.
And you only got so many guys on the roster. When you run out of combinations and situations, you also run out of luck, and that's exactly what we did.
Did Hogan ever have a problem putting you over 2 weeks in a row, or was that?
What's he going to do about it?
All right.
That's it.
All right. What did you think about being put with Stephen McMichael? Because I've heard a lot of guys talk about him.
I love Mongo.
Right.
And I knew what he was in the NFL. I knew he had limited potential because he's pretty banged up too. And 38-year-old rookie in our business is a little old, but he was still a great athlete. What Mongo lacked at that stage of the game is what $5 million in the bank will give you: enthusiasm, the need, the passion to be good. He wanted to get good enough to go have fun on Monday night, but he didn't really want to put the time in to learn the business. And that's fine. I understand that. I enjoyed the character and the personality of Mongo, but I knew he was never going to be a great asset to the wrestling business. I hoped he would, but I tell you, he was a strong enough character that standing out there as part of the group, he had a hell of a look to him.
How did you actually injure your arm?
The arm?
Yeah.
It's all a direct result of the neck.
The neck.
Yeah.
Now that actually happened in '89, your neck injury, right?
The first one, when I was with WWF, wrestling the Rockers, Madison Square Garden in the afternoon, Jannetty hooked me for, it was called a victory roll. Jumped up, legs go over the shoulders, he arches back, flips you through. Well, I didn't get tucked, head, boom, right in the mat. That's the first break. I had a crack of the, we'll say C5. Actually had to wrestle that night in Boston, and that's all you had. But in those days, I mean, Boston was going to be sold out. That was a big-time payoff. We were next to last on the card, right underneath Hogan. I wasn't missing that for the world. A lot of guys would have took.
Okay, your injury.
Okay.
You were in Boston, you couldn't move.
Yeah, that was the first chink in the armor. Had to wrestle in Boston that night. Thank God, tag situation is your partner takes care of you. I don't think I even got in the whole match. Then when I first came back in '90, wrestling the Steiners, Ole and I, in Greensboro, the arm just went out. But this was the right arm now. Just crawling across the ring, I think I took a power slam or something. The arm just died. The rear delt completely atrophied. Bicep died, never came back. That was a 3-month rehab, no surgery. Came back, was able to wrestle. Then right before Halloween Havoc, my neck had been in 1997. My neck had been giving me fits, really tight, just tight and gravel and just brutal. I guess it was just chips moving around. Been broke a couple times at this point. The x-rays had shown there were a couple of the discs were completely herniated and this and that. The doctors are saying quit. And you take it with a grain of salt. Finally, the day before Halloween Havoc, I walked in the Gold's Gym in Las Vegas, grabbed a couple 30-pound dumbbells just to warm up. And apparently, from locking the door in the parking lot to walking across that parking lot, a chip must have moved over a nerve canal and shut this hand down, my left hand. Because when I grabbed those dumbbells like a nightmare, it just fell out of my hand. Boom, hit the floor. It's like one of those horrible dreams. You look around, make sure you're awake. Tried to pick it up. My thumb and the first 2 fingers were completely gone. And we all think it's just a pinched nerve. That's what we're conditioned to as wrestlers. Didn't say anything. Was unable to work out that day. Wrestled Luger. And if you go back and watch the match, I had tape, on fingers and anything I could do to hang on. Had no use of the left hand. And consequently, I wrestled that match and wrestled another probably 2 months, very limited. We're on a limited schedule. November and December. We didn't wrestle about 6 times in December. January we went to, my left hand just kept getting worse. It started to atrophy, and my arm started to atrophy through here. And I said, God, this is bad. I started having some tests run, and the doctor said, this is bad. This is bad. You need to stop. You need to stop. Finally, I was lacing my boots up at a Disney taping, and I was having a problem getting it through the eyelets. And Eric looked at me and said, "What's the matter with your hand?" I said, "It's been this way a couple of months, Eric." He said, "Take your boots off." I said, "I want you to go get checked." I said, "I had been checked." He said, "What'd they say?" They said, "Well, quit." I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I want to have this one last test." So I had another MRI and a CAT scan, and diagnosis was 5, 6, 7, and T1. All the nerve canals were totally blocked. They had to go in. They went through the back. They split me from about halfway down my head to about 5 inches down my neck, and went in and took all the bone chips out, all the flat bones that run perpendicular to the spine. They drilled them, took them out. Consequently, that ended it.
How hard was it to deal with mentally?
I wanted to die. The post-op pain, athletes have a high pain tolerance just because we're hurt all the time. I've never experienced anything that was even remotely could scratch the surface. And I've torn my groin all the way up in my belly, where I've been purple from my knee to right below my chest, just totally purple. Broke ankles, you name it, my neck, everything. I've never experienced anything like the post-op pain. I wanted to kill myself. I actually looked at my wife one day in the hospital. It was like the second day after surgery, and I said, the morphine wasn't working. They were giving me 2 Percocets and a blue Valium every 2.5 hours, plus the every 6-minute drip wasn't even scathing. I looked at my wife. I said, get my money man up here. I want to get everything in order, and tell him I need to talk to him. I was actually going to blow my brains out in the hospital. Never experienced anything like it. Finally, the pain started to subside the 3rd day a little bit, and it was bearable. That was the hardest part. Then I still thought I'd wrestle again after I got out of the hospital. Once I got out of the hospital and started the road to recovery, I thought, I can overcome this. Started coming back and started back in the gym about a month later. 3 months later, I'd been training for a couple of months. A guy came up to me and slapped me in the back. Just said, "Hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a while." Boom. I had a thing of water in my hand, and it just fell out of my hand. And when the guy slapped me on the back, the jolt, system shutdown is all I can tell you, that went through my body. And this was just a little bitty guy. He said, "Hey, Double A, where you been? I hadn't seen you on TV." He just patted me on the back. That jolt told me, it's over. That moment in time was the realization and the biggest depression I've ever felt. That was 4 days before I had the retirement speech at Nitro.
How emotional was that? I mean, that was real.
It was the realest thing I've ever done in front of a camera. And if I could have seen Rick's face, I'd have never got through the interview. Thank God I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at everybody but him. To say goodbye to something that you've loved this much and it's all you've ever known, and not to know, how you're going to feed your family. I mean, let's face it, I had a 8-month-old baby and a 11-year-old kid and a wife, and bills from now on. I was 38 years old. How are you going to, what are you going to do? Pretty scary.
How did the company treat you as far as?
Good. I have no complaints. I had already moved into a agent position as well as wrestling, which means I go to the house show towns and take care of the towns and everything. So I had a job to fall back on, and I was assured by Eric that hey, you got a job, don't worry about it. That made me feel better, but the fact is I'm a wrestler, I'm not an agent. I'm not an announcer. I'm a wrestler. You take that away from me. And the worst part was I felt good other than every time I stepped off a curb getting this jolt or someone whacking me on the back, that, my kid running up, be sitting on the edge of the bed and jumping on my neck, I'd get this jolt. And that's a 3-year-old.
Right.
I felt great other than that. It was just one of those things that's hard to swallow.
So there's no way to ever return to the ring.
No, I have no protection.
Right.
All the shock absorbers have been taken out. Now, anyone that knew me from 89 to 97, when you talked to me, it was Dean Malenko.
Right.
The whole upper body had to turn. Now I have this, which I didn't have, and I'm 80% pain-free. I have bad days, good days, but I never had this. So there's a blessing underneath there, but still,
Right.
I would swap this for that if I could wrestle again.
Right. When Kevin Nash and Scott Hall came in, what were your thoughts?
I didn't really know what to think. I knew that it was two of Vince's top guys and it would hurt him. I, like everybody else, didn't have any idea of the impact that they would have as far as the outsiders and the formulation of the NWO. Anytime two top players come together, that's going to make an impact. God, if anybody would have known at that point in time, it would have been pretty scary because the whole picture changed
Right.
at that point.
With the Kurt Hennig feud.
I'm sorry?
Didn't Rick feud with Kurt a little bit?
Yes. When Kurt accepted the Horseman position on my retirement speech, and then I think 3 weeks after or something, switched, went NWO.
Right.
Obviously, I had to stay out of that for some time. Rick was hurt. He was out. That's where Dean and Chris and Mongo and those guys went on this tirade to put the Horsemen back together. And we went through JJ was involved. We went through a series of arguments on television to try to put this deal back together. The spark that got me back involved was, and I'll never forget that cage slamming on Rick's head. It was one of those nauseating things that you see and you just go, God, it's like a dog getting run over. They put, Rick Rude and Hennig put Dean in that same position, Pensacola, Florida, of all
Right.
places. Not this had anything to do with it, but my wife's hometown. It's kind of like my second hometown. God, they put him in that same position. I just saw this flashback, and I just ran down there like an idiot and kind of turned the thing around, and that kind of was the spark that got the Horsemen back rolling.
Are you disappointed or glad that they brought the Horseman characters back so many times? You said before you wish they would have just let it die. And
Yeah, I wish. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. If it could have ever been brought back to the level that it was first time around, even the second or even the third, I think after the Barry Windham version, everything after that
right.
was just cannon fodder and was never treated properly. The people have always liked this. They've always identified with it. As long as Flair and Anderson were the kind of the nucleus of it, you could add a couple of guys and it would still been okay. But it's never, like I said, the NWO versions at the time looked like a quick fix. The Horseman deal at the time looked like a quick fix. If it helped any of the guys move up in stature at that time, then I'm glad for them. Did it do anything for me? Did it do anything for Rick? Did it do anything for the company?
Right.
Who knows?
All right. How's life right now as a road agent?
I'm very thankful to have the job. I like to help the young guys, the ones that deserve it. We're back to DiBiase. You know, if
Right.
there's ever a young guy that deserves that help him.
We could talk about Bill Goldberg now. It's a perfect time because, from what I understand, you've helped Bill come a long way as far as helping him out of the ring, deal with stuff, and teaching him how to do a promo and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain your role?
Yeah, I write Bill's promos for him. Bill has a pretty clear idea of who he is. Sometimes it's easier for someone else to see you and know what you would say in a situation than what you would say. And I can see his character very clearly, and I know Bill. So, you know, I help him with his promos. From day one, when Bill was first put on TV, there was a couple of matches that were a little shady. Eric came to me and he said, right now, he said, you're married to Goldberg. You help him with his matches, you tell him what he needs to do, and you help coach him. And I have from day one, and it's been one of the most pleasant experiences to have this much to do with his success. You know, it's something I'll put up on my trophy mantle and keep for a long time.
Right.
And it's just, you know, forget his success. It's just the fact that what kind of guy he is that means so much. He's just a quality guy, and he's a good person. And when I see him standing out in front of the Marriott, Charleston, West Virginia, for 3 hours and sign autographs, to know I was a part of that, helping mold that guy, and that's above and beyond what anybody else has ever done that I've seen in the business. That makes me proud of him. Forget how many he's won or how many he's lost. That tells you who Bill Goldberg is.
And is it hard dealing with the higher priced guaranteed guys on salary or with egos and stuff?
Sometimes. You know, I'm one of the guys.
Right.
And just because I work in the office, I'm still one of the guys, and I look at it from a wrestler's perspective. My loyalty is to WCW. But with that in hand, I'm still one of the wrestlers. So you have to look at it from a wrestler perspective, because you can't force your will on anybody. And just because I have been given information that I'm supposed to pass on, I can't force anyone to do that. No one can. You have to, and you shouldn't want to. You should want to make the wrestler part of it to where he feels good about what he's doing, and that's the only way you're going to get a good finished product. So I talk to the guys on their level. Most of them I've worked with 1,000 times. They know what kind of guy I am. A lot of times I have to tell them the truth, and it's not what they want to hear. But if I can't tell them the truth in those situations, then, you know, if I'm lying then when can I tell them, you know, I can't tell them the truth when it is the truth.
Right.
If that makes any sense. So I just try to level with the guys, and I'm just the messenger. But I've also have the, have the ability and to kind of clean up what is given to me, to pass on to them, and we try to make it, my job is to make it the very best I can for them, which means the product will be the best for the fans. And that's what I do, and I do it from a wrestler perspective. And I mean, when you're talking to a Bill Goldberg or a Scott Steiner or Kevin Nash or Rick Steiner or, you know, Booker T or Sting or whoever it is, it's always a little bit of a, you're kind of put in a little bit of a situation to where you don't know what they're going to say. And it's a little bit intimidating, but like I said, I come across from a wrestler perspective more than an office perspective, and that helps.
Right.
And they appreciate that. I think I'm respected amongst the talent as a wrestler, and the way to get respect in as an office person is just tell them the truth. And a lot of times that means I'm given stuff that I don't agree with from the office, you know, and I have to tell them that as a wrestler, you know, this is not exactly what I would do in this situation, but we don't have a choice here. This is what we've been given. Let's make it the best we can. I owe that to the office to do that, and it's touch and go sometimes.
When Rick was having a lot of problems with Eric Bischoff, did it put a strain on your relationship with Eric Bischoff at all when he's had the lawsuit?
Yeah, because I'm always going to be Rick's best friend.
Right.
And if they're in a squabble, he's probably going to be mad at me, and vice versa. If he's mad at me, he's probably going to be mad at Rick, and that's just human nature.
What was your take on that whole situation that happened when?
I thought it was very unfortunate because it was bad for WCW. It cut down, on Eric's creative juices. Obviously, when you don't have Ric Flair on your television, it can't be a plus because he's a great segment. Every time you put him out there, he's a rating. He's an entertainment segment, and he always tries to give you, what you ask. Rick is an egomaniac. Right up until the time he gets the microphone in his hand or the bell rings, and Rick's all business. And anybody that doesn't know that doesn't know Rick. The guy's 14 times world champion, and I think he's only won 14 matches in his life. And that's the times he won the belt. I mean, you look back on it,
Right.
So out of 10,000 matches, he's 14 and 10,000. So if you look at it from that perspective.
Do you think it was a knock on Rick that Eric put him in with the vignettes with the mental hospital? You think that was a dig at Rick to be like, I mean, how did Rick take that? Was he happy doing all this stuff with the?
Was he happy doing it? No, but he put his heart in it and made it the best he could.
Right.
That's why I can tell you he's a pro. And it wasn't good for his kids at school, I can tell you that. It wasn't good for his wife. Most wrestling fans will know it's just a skit on TV. There's some that don't. And let me tell you, my kid was going to school, my oldest boy was going to school with his kids at that particular point in time, and 12 and 13-year-old kids can be vicious. And they were. And that was hard on them.
All right. We were talking earlier about Bill Watts and Eric Watts wrestling and stuff like that. Do you think David Flair was ready for the push that they gave him, or do you think that they should have maybe sent him to the power plant and maybe sent him off to a territory for a while, and they could have made more money with, it was David Flair, Ric Flair's kid? You think they pushed him too soon and they kind of ruined him, or they made him to a comedy act, basically?
Of course. It was supposed to be a one-time deal. He was supposed to be there one time to wrestle on the pay-per-view, and that was it. And it was received so well, then the company wanted to hire him, and they put him out there in a capacity that kid will never have a chance because you're Ric Flair's son. If you're equally as good or better wrestler than Ric Flair, you're still not Ric Flair. You're still never going to be the dad. It's an impossible situation. David will never be able to fill his father's shoes. He should be taken off TV. He should disappear right now and brought back 3 years from now. Go put him in a cave with 5 guys that are top flight wrestlers and teach the kid to wrestle. He's got to be...
Does he have it in his heart? I mean, does he love the business?
To the degree that he should, no.
Okay.
No. I think David was cast into this situation. Then the money was put on him. But let's face it, I mean, David... he's had a lot of nice things being Rick's son. The money was not so much a big deal. I mean, he's always had cars. He's always had nice clothes. He's always had nice things. He's had toys. He's had vacations. He's flown down and flown here and done all the things that Ric Flair's kids should do. As hard as his fathers work, they should have some perks. So to give the kid X amount of dollars, whatever it is, it's not a fortune. It wasn't that big of an impact. Does he have that passion that I had, or that his father had, or that other guys have had? No, I don't think so.
Do you think that WCW was better before Bischoff and Hogan came into the picture, or
Absolutely not.
you think it's better?
Yeah.
Right now in wrestling today, who is, in your opinion, the best worker?
Chris Benoit. No hesitation.
Okay. What was one of your most memorable matches that you've ever had?
Rick in Asheville. Just for the emotion of it. The Rockers with Tully and myself stands way out. Simply because I could perform. The match with the Rockers, I was performing at the very best of my ability, what I had to offer. With Rick, it was all emotion.
What do you think was the downfall of Eric Bischoff?
I think we brought some musical acts and some different things into our company that needed us a lot more than we needed them. They bled off of us. We didn't need Master P. What a joke that was. We didn't need the Kiss character.
Right.
We didn't need Kiss. They got no rating on our show for their quarter hour. Non-existent, and it cost us a fortune. When we started trying to implement those type things into our business, we were getting huge numbers, 4.8, 4.5, those numbers are huge. We didn't need anybody. And when people started showing up on our TV, the guy from Mad TV,
Right.
and whoever the chick was that came stumbling down there with him,
Right.
horrified me. They hadn't been on TV since. Who were they? No one knew. No one cared. All these things that, people that just suddenly arrive on our television should never have been able to do that. And I think that type of mistake is what cost us. Huge.
What were your early impressions of when Vince Russo came into power?
A whole different psychology, whole different deal. Great storyteller.
Right. Do you think he disrespected the veterans? As far as like the thing he did with Ric Flair, I mean, to me, I saw no point in shaving his head because here's Flair, a wrestler, and Bischoff, what's the point of shaving his head?
If it would have been made the biggest deal in the history of WCW, shaving Rick's head was like shaving Hulk's mustache.
All right.
You talk about mistakes we've made. The day Kevin Sullivan took off Hulk's mustache, every wrestler on the television, the very next TV, should have had a comment about that.
Right.
This is old school.
Right,
I'm just
right.
telling you, if I was writing the show, and I'm not capable of being a booker, but if I'm writing the show, Hulk Hogan's mustache is his signature deal, along with the blonde hair and that bandana. But the mustache is what you identify with. Every wrestler on that show that had an interview segment should have commented on that. Ric Flair, same thing.
Should have been a wrestler too that did it to get,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Where's the payoff?
Right.
There is no payoff. Vince's mistake was he got himself involved in too many angles with too many guys and spread himself too thin, and didn't mean anything. He's got 15 guys mad at him. He's only one guy in one match per night.
Right.
Too much, and that happens a lot of times.
Do you think it's good for him to put himself on TV as much as he did, or
No.
No.
No, it's never that good. There's an old cliche in the wrestling business: you can't book and work. Well,
Right.
You can, but it has to be one angle at a time. Eric Bischoff had the most heat of anybody I've seen at that particular time when he switched to NWO. It was huge, huge. No one should have gotten to him for 6 months, 8 months. And that's just wrestling 101. Well, you start trying to get involved with these different guys, and before you know it, you've spread yourself so thin.
How would you compare Vince and Bischoff to each other? And do you think they'll ever be able to work together without any problems, or do you think that's already a done deal?
I never say never.
Never.
If it's in both their best interests and
Right.
there's a dollar involved, you bet your ass they'll be together. Of course they will. Anybody can swallow their pride. Never say never. There's guys that have worked on top and worked 500 times that hate each other's guts. Comparing the two, I think they're both driven. I think they're both motivated. I think they're both very intelligent. Here's the difference. Vince is the captain of his own ship. Total autonomy, the final word. Doesn't go anywhere. He owns his own company. Eric had limited total autonomy, but he had other people to answer to. When that's the case and you're in a corporate environment, you're never going to be able to go full bore. That's what's always going to separate you. Vince is the owner. Eric's the boss of someone else's company.
If Vince were ever to make you another offer to come back as a road agent, would you want to do that, or do you want to remain with WCW?
I don't know. Depends on how lucrative the offer was, how many days. Again,
Right.
I got a 3-year-old again. I don't want to be gone all the time. I'm 42 years old. I don't want to spend 24 days on the road. If he made me an offer that was tremendous and I was going to be gone 12 days a month, it'd be something to consider.
What is your take on the situation with Hulk Hogan and Vince Russo?
Every time I think it's real, it's not. Every time I think it's not, it is.
Right.
So I don't even have an opinion.
Okay.
Until it all unfolds, I'm not going to be stupid enough to comment on it.
Right.
So I'll be the one that goes the wrong way.
What is your current take on the situation? Well, not situation. What is your opinion on WCW right now, the product?
I think we have, number one, right now what we need more so than anything is a boss. Doesn't matter who the boss is, there needs to be a boss, someone that has the final word, who's dictating what goes on that TV. There are a lot of guys that aren't getting paid to plug holes in the dike, and that's not fair to them. Unless they're designated and paid accordingly to be in that position, suffer the ramifications of the losses, get the benefit of the good situations that come from it. Because right now we're in limbo, and
Do you think it will get better, or do you think it will get worse?
well, until there's a boss, until
Right.
there's a direction, until we know someone comes in and says, we're keeping you guys, we're keeping this crew intact, let's clean up our own product, or we're selling you, we're cleaning house, we're going to have a brand new staff in here. Until there's a decision made, we're in neutral, and we're in the mud about 4 inches deep, we're just spinning our wheels.
Do you think the politics in WCW is worse, or is it the same as anywhere?
No, it's that way everywhere.
Okay.
In any kind of job, it's that way.
And what is your opinion on Kevin Nash when he was booking?
I thought he did a good job because he lended a wrestler's perspective with a little bit of the gaga.
Do you think he pushed himself too much and his friends, or?
I don't think so.
No.
No, I don't think so. There's always going to be that contention, but it's always going to be from whoever's not getting the push.
Right.
You know.
A couple more questions here. What do you possibly think will happen if, well, right now it's pretty much given that maybe Eric Bischoff might go ahead and buy WCW, but about a month ago there was talk that Vince McMahon was going to go ahead and buy the company. What is your take on the situation? Do you think it would be good for the business, or do you think it would be really bad for the guys because they wouldn't have anywhere else to go and there would be no competition for Vince and the product could get stale? Or?
Everything you said, I agree with. Everything I agree with. Do I think Vince would be a good boss? Would he run it like a business? Of course. Total autonomy and just one company, it's not good for anybody. Where's the competition? Who do you look over your shoulder and see who's catching up? Got to work a little harder. Let's beat these guys. Let's do better than. Without any competition, I think you lose your passion and
Right.
your will to excel, and that's not good for anybody. And I'll never believe that. The best thing for Vince and Eric and every wrestler and everybody that works a camera or plugs in a wire backstage is to have two companies thriving. Three's better. And the fact is you can only accommodate so many people for so many shows, and there's a lot of people that this is their life, this is their business. They need jobs.
Right.
Do I want to see Paul Heyman rise again? Of course I do. Would I love to see Smoky Mountain Wrestling or something similar come back up? I wish there were 10 places to go.
What was your favorite angle that you've ever participated in? Not match, but, Dusty Rhodes in the parking lot.
Oh, that was great. Dusty in the parking lot was terrific.
Breaking
The
Dusty's
thing
leg.
that I thought probably was the most visual on TV is when Zabisco and I slammed
Barry's.
Barry Windham's arm in the car door.
Okay. What do you think? Well, I already asked you about WCW. What do you think they need to do to get back in the game? Who do you think is being used to the best ability in WCW right now, and who do you think is like the most underutilized guy in the company?
Booker has ascended And I was looking at one of the old wrestling WCW books a few months back, 6 months back or 8 months, whatever it was. They said, you know, what 3 guys do you think will rise in the next year? And it may have been last year. I said Steiner, Booker, and Chris Benoit. It had to be before they left.
Right.
So that would have been my choice. I think Booker is the one guy that has really ascended within the company. I think a guy we fumbled with that they started off pushing the right way is Lance Storm.
Yeah.
And they've kind of fumbled as of late with him. Got nothing but respect for the guy. That Elix Skipper
Right.
has a tremendous career ahead of him if he's guided properly and brought along the right way and is injury-free. With his style, he's not going to be injury-free. But if he's lucky,
Right.
if he's just lucky, and that's all it is luck.
At what point in your career, or should I ask you this earlier, did you say, wow, I made it?
Probably when I was able to go out, I'm going to say it was 86. I went out and wrestled Ronnie Garvin in Charlotte, North Carolina, 30 minutes on TV. We were taping the 1 hour worldwide show, and I wrestled him 30 minutes on TV. He knocked me out with like 7 seconds left in the match of the time limit. And we had a team meeting of all the wrestlers like a week or two later. And Dusty stood up at the meeting and he said, if we were going to show a tape of what wrestling should be, that's the match I will show. That gave me credibility in my mind that I'd arrived, that I could compete on the top level. That's one of those things someone says to you that means a lot to me.
Out of all your tag team partners, who did you consider the easiest to work with?
Business standpoint,
Yeah.
Bobby was probably the easiest. Probably the biggest pacifist. The best partner I ever had, no doubt, is Tully Blanchard. I have no doubt about that.
What is the best rib you've ever seen?
Oh, God, it had to be the Steiners stripping off Dallas Page naked in Charleston, West Virginia, middle of the ring.
Right.
Oh, yeah. We were having it's like a mini battle royal thing, and Steiner wasn't even in the match. He literally came from the back, hit the ring, and stripped Page off totally nude in the middle of the ring.
Right.
Now, this was the good part of it. Page rolled out. He's naked now.
Right.
Humperdinck pulls his shirt off. Page puts the shirt in front of him. Everyone was aghast at Humperdinck with his shirt off more than they were at Page being naked. It's the greatest thing I ever saw. Everybody went, oh my God, oh God, put your shirt back on.
2 more questions, actually 3. Where do you see the business in the next 5 years?
To be successful, we got to go back to basics. WCW has got to put some iron in the officials, from the commissioner down to the referees. They've got to have a ruling. Guys can't put their hands on refs. To be able to get away these relaxed rules and get away with everything there is, if it's not cheating, there's no heat. If there's no heat, who are you going to get mad at? You don't get mad at somebody in a match, who cares? That's a huge point. That's one of those sticklers with me. I see going back to cutting out, chairs, baseball bats, wrenches, because it doesn't matter. It's all BS in everyone's mind. Let's go back to seeing longer matches, less people walking down the hall on their way to the ring. Let's add that to match time. Um, the old formula that I think still works, so-and-so's up, he has an entrance, so-and-so's up, he has an entrance, we have a match. The conclusion of that match, we either had an interview beforehand or we have one after. We go to a break, and when we come out of that break, let's let the announcers analyze for the people what they've just seen. Let's complete a thought before we move on. Skipping around.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, so-and-so gets hit in the head with a wrench. Let's skip to somebody out back running into somebody else walking in the back door. Oh, hey, what are you doing? Oh, well, how'd you get it? Well, da-da-da. Go to break. Who cares? No one cares. There's a formula that works. Let's get back to it. If I can't follow it, the fans can't follow it.
Do you think that formula ever go back into play in WCW, or you
If
think
we're going to
it's...
be successful, we got it. Vince does it.
All right.
I mean, you look at Vince. He has less TNA and eye candy than he's ever had. But his girls come out on TV for a wrestling match. They can perform.
All right.
Our girls don't perform because they're not ready. It's not their fault. These girls have been in ECW. They've been in Japan. They've been in all these different places. So when it's time to turn it on, you don't know there's a girl out there wrestling. You know, these girls can go. Less of that. If there's one girl match a night, let that be it, and that's the end of it. Let's feature what brought us to the dance. Two great wrestlers in a 15-minute match, bell to bell, and let's have a winner, let's have a loser. If we don't go back to that concept,
I agree.
we're done.
Two more questions. One, you're probably known as one of the greatest talkers in the business. And I want to know if we taught you how to do a promo, as far as, did you study tapes, or did it just come into play, or?
I didn't really learn from anyone. It kind of goes back to the retirement speech. Not a great look, not really fast, not really quick, average size, average speed, average guy. The one thing I learned early on, and I learned this in Pensacola, Florida, and Dothan Television, people will listen to you if you talk to them instead of talking at them. And I learned that early on. If you will talk to people and talk in terms they can understand, give them an example of something they can relate to in their everyday life, then they get it. Analogies work. That's the style that I use. Give them an everyday analogy they can understand. Some interviews are so far out there that if the character is strong enough, people will just sit there and they won't know what they've said, but they'll watch it anyway.
All right.
Me, I'm not the guy, let's face it, I'm not Paul Newman. I'm not the guy you're going to sit there and watch for 3 minutes. If you don't understand what I'm saying, you're going to go click. But if I give you something you understand, you'll listen. And if it made sense at the end of it, you go, yeah, he's right. That's it in a nutshell.
Makes sense. Now, in closing, I'd like to ask you if you have anything you'd like to say to the fans that have followed you from, the start.
Absolutely. The depression that I have had, and that maybe a lot of other people have, is a direct result of the fact that this isn't about the money. I'm not in a 10,000 square foot house. I don't have a huge swimming pool in the back. I'm pretty much an everyday Joe. I'm just like you. I'm just like everybody else. I'm a guy that came from nothing, very meager beginnings, and had a pretty successful career. The money, the notoriety, the fact that I can get a seat in a restaurant, shot to the first of the line, has nothing to do with any of it. Your involvement, your emotion that you give me every time I came through that curtain is the reason I left my house Christmas morning at 6 o'clock, never got to be Santa Claus for my kids, to go do a 1 o'clock show 2,000 miles away, and another one that night to entertain your kids. It's the reason when I had two toes virtually almost cut off, dropping a freezer on them Sunday morning, still made the show that night. 105 fever, still made the show that night. The emotion you gave to me, whether it was love me, hate me, whatever it was, is the reason I've been coming back for 15 years. Everything you feel that I gave you, you gave me 10 times that. I want everybody out there that ever bought a ticket, that ever had a comment about Arn Anderson, one way or the other, to take a bow. You're the reason that I've done what I've done. My success is your success. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bro, I appreciate it.
Definitely.